Hi everyone, welcome to Uncle Yeow and the Singapore Story. In today's episode, I'll be talking about Second World War, especially Japanese invasion of Malaya and Singapore. Now, Second World War started in Europe on the 1st of September 1939 when Hitler Germany invaded Poland. Then Britain and France declared war on Germany. That's how Second World War started in Europe. But in this part of our world, Second World War began on the 8th of December 1941. The Japanese came and bombarded Malaya and Singapore at the same time, 4:30 a.m. in the morning. But hours before that, they went to bomb Pearl Harbor. And when they bombed Pearl Harbor, that drew the US into the war. So that's how Second World War started in this part of our world, known as the Pacific War. Now, the two main protagonists of the Battle of Malaya and Singapore were, number one, Lieutenant General Tomoyuki Yamashita of the Japanese Imperial Army, and Lieutenant General Arthur Percival of the British Allied Forces. Lieutenant General Tomoyuki Yamashita was given 100 days to conquer Malaya and Singapore. But he took only 55 days to conquer Malaya, rested 1 week across the causeway, and then the next week came over and took another week to conquer Singapore. So all in all, he took only 70 days instead of the 100 days given to him. So he looks pretty good on his KPI. Now, why did the British fail to stop the Japanese? Well, there were many reasons, all right? But number one, the Japanese Imperial Army was actually a battle-hardened army that had fought in the Sino-Japanese War in China. So they were very well experienced. Whereas the British Allied Forces were made up of different armies, the biggest of which was the Indian National Army, Indian Army Corps. And then you have the British Forces, Australian Army, New Zealanders, all right, even Scottish, Canadians, and also two Malay regiments. So it was a mixed bag. Therefore, in terms of unity and chain of command, it was a bit more complicated and complex. So that is not in favor of the British Allied Forces. On top of that, the Japanese army were in many ways more advanced. They have got light tanks, whereas the British Allied Forces do not have. Now, why? Lieutenant General Arthur Percival did request tanks from London, but the people in London said, oh, in the Malayan jungle, you cannot use tank. Tank is no use. Therefore, he was not granted any tanks. Whereas the Japanese came with light tanks, small version light tanks. And by then, in fact, Malaya was already quite developed. They actually have a lot of roads. So tanks was not a problem. So that's number one. Number two, a lot of the British Allied forces were new recruits. They have not even experienced learning how to handle the rifle. So they were a lot more unprepared. So being a mixed bag, under the circumstances, it was an uphill battle to take on the battle-hardened Japanese. So Lieutenant General Yamashita took only 55 days to conquer Malaya. All right. And then the British forces had no choice but to retreat into Singapore. The Japanese then, across the causeway, waited, planned for 1 week, and then came over the next week and took down Singapore. So that was very quick and very fast. Now, a number of reasons. In the first wave of air attack on Malaya and Singapore, the Japanese took out all the airfields, all the aircrafts on the airfields, but they left the runway intact so that when they come, they could actually make use of the airbase and the runway. The British at that time, they did have aircraft, but the aircraft was less superior. These were the Brewster Buffaloes and Vickers Wildebeest. The mere name suggests they were actually backward, slow-moving aircrafts. Whereas the Japanese, they have very modern, advanced aircrafts like the Mitsubishi Zeros and the Nakajimas. So in terms of air power, the British lost out. And in no time, all their aircrafts were destroyed and they have to move off the remaining aircrafts to Indonesia. Okay, so that was the situation. In actual fact, the British did dispatch a naval fleet comprising of, number one, an aircraft carrier, the HMS Indomitable, and then 2 battleships and many other destroyers. The 2 battleships, one was Prince of Wales, which was only newly commissioned, and then also the HMS Repulse. But by the time this ship came to this part of the world on the 10th of December, unfortunately, the aircraft carrier HMS Indomitable ran aground in Jamaica and had to be towed away for repairs. So they were without any air support. So the remaining Prince of Wales, Repulse, and other destroyers, by the time they come, they were mere sitting ducks for the Japanese Mitsubishi Zeros and Nakajimas. So they were sunk off the east coast of Malaya. So that was the situation. So because of that, without air power, the British did not have the upper hand. The Japanese had the upper hand. So that was the situation that led to the fall of Malaya. Now, in the case of Singapore, by that time, there was still about 90 to 100,000 British Allied forces in Singapore. And the Japanese force that actually attacked or invaded Singapore at the time was only about 23,000. So it was a much smaller force. But Lieutenant General Yamashita was actually a master tactician. He was a propounder of Sun Tzu Ping Fa. Now, he had many deceptions and decoys. For example, one of his decoy was that he gave the impression that they were going to attack Singapore from the northeast opposite Pulau Ubin. What he did was, in the night, he had 2 trucks turn on the lights and then they moved towards the northeast. When they reached there, switch off the lights, turn back, and then double back again, switching on the lights. So by doing this numerous times, he gave the impression that they were actually going to attack from the northeast across Pulau Ubin, but that was never the case. All right. So the British, even though they had 90 over 1,000 men, but they have to spread them around the perimeters of the island. So, which means that the forces was very much spread out. All right. And when the Japanese finally attacked, they actually came from the northwest instead of northeast, the Kranji area. And because of that, they were able to move very swiftly to the center and then take down Singapore. So all in all, if you think about it, all right, there are no winners in war. They are all losers. But at the end, because of the lack of resources, all right, bad decisions taken, the British lost, and Singapore fell to the Japanese on February 15, 1942, a mere 70 days from the day when they invaded Malaya. So that is the story of the Battle of Malaya and Singapore. Now, 15 February 1942 was a very sad day. First of all, it was a Sunday. It was also the first day of Chinese New Year. Can you imagine? Suddenly, overnight, no more Chinese New Year, no more ang pao, no more celebration. Everybody were fearful for their lives. Okay? And that led to the 3 years and 8 months of Japanese occupation, which we will be talking about in the next episode. So if you are keen to learn more about the Singapore story, do like, subscribe, and share. This is Uncle Yeow signing off, saying adios. Thank you.